Perpendicular bisector. So for the perpendicular bisector theorem, it says if a point lies on the perpendicular bisector of a segment, then it's equidistant from the endpoints of the segment. So what that means that if CD, this guy right here, is perpendicular to AB, then AD is congruent to DB. If those two things are true, then AC is congruent to CB. That means that this line is congruent to that part. Or if you have the converse, remember the converse is the opposite. So if AC is equal to CB, then that means that CD is perpendicular to AB and AD is congruent to DB. Remember, even though we're talking about perpendicular bisectors, our lines and line segments still need to have the proper notation. So I'm going to do examples 1 and 4, and then you'll do the rest. So it says find the value of x. So because it's a perpendicular bisector, this is perpendicular, that means that these two are congruent. If all that is true, then that means that this side is congruent to that side. All it wants us to do is find x. If these two are congruent, it means that they are equal to each other. So 7x plus 24 is equal to 13x minus 48. So now we just need to solve it to find what x equals. So I'm going to add 48 to both sides. We get 7x plus 72 is equal to 13x. These cancel out. I'm going to subtract 7x from both sides. And we're going step by step. For those of you who still aren't quite sure about how to solve equations, 13x minus 7 is 6x. Divide both sides by 6. You get that x equals 12. If we double check the question, it says find the value of x. That's what we did. So that is my answer. So I was going to do 1 and 4. So number 4 says find EG. Well, if we're looking, EG is that length right there. So they said, or what information they gave us, they said these two sides are congruent. That must mean that this is congruent to that. All right, so the two halves are equal to the whole. So we can say 14x minus 37 is equal to 2x plus 11. So if we solve the equation, so looking, I'm going to add 37 to this side. We get 14x is equal to 2x plus 48. I'm going to subtract 2x. I get 12x is equal to 48 because these cancel out. Divide both sides by 12. We get that x equals 4. You got to be careful. They didn't ask you for x. They asked you for EG, this part that I highlighted. So if we substitute in the 4, we get 2 times 4 plus 11. So EG is equal to 19. Be sure and box your answers. Do 2, 3, 5, and 6 for practice. So that was perpendicular bisectors. We're going to turn to the back and also look at our angle bisectors. So the angle bisector theorem says that if a point is on a bisector of an angle, then the point is equidistant from the sides of the angle. So if AD bisects angle BAC, so we're looking at this angle right here, BAC, and AD is bisecting it. Remember, bisect means to cut in half. And AB is perpendicular to BD and AC is perpendicular to CD, then BD is congruent to DC. That means this one is congruent to that one. Or your converse, which is a point on the interior of an angle and equidistant from the sides of the angle, then the point is on the angle bisector. So if BD is congruent to DC, and AB is perpendicular to BD and AC is perpendicular to CD, then AD, which is a ray, bisects angle BAC, which means that the measure of angle BAD is congruent to the measure of angle CAD. That means that this angle is congruent to that angle. It's a lot of information. But let's look at a couple practice problems because it all boils down to a couple simple things. We're going to do 1 and 4 again. So looking at number 1, it says find the value of x. Well, if we look, remembering what an angle bisector does, this is congruent to this. This is congruent to that. So they want the value of x. Putting in those hash marks shows me that 4x plus 30 is equal to 9x minus 5. So I can write an equation. All I need to do is solve. So if I add 5 and I subtract 4x to move everything to the same side, 9x minus 4x is 5x. 5 cancels out, 4's cancel out, 30 plus 5 is 35. Divide both sides by 5, x is equal to 7. Reading my question, find the value of x. Well, that's what I did. They did not ask me to substitute it back in. So let's look at number 4. It says find the measure of angle XWV. Well, it wants to measure, I like to highlight, XW, oh, I read it wrong. We're doing 4. Measure of XWZ. XWZ. So it only wants about half of it, remember, because it's the angle bisector. Well, because it is an angle bisector, we know that this is the same as that. So then I can say that 8x minus 32 is equal to 3x plus 3. So that being said, now I solved the equation, so I'm going to add 32. 8x is equal to 3x plus 35. Subtract 3x. We get 5x is equal to 35. These cancel out. Divide both sides by 5. We get that x equals 7. Well, reading the question, they didn't ask for x. They asked for the measure of angle XWZ. XWZ I highlighted. We need to substitute x back into that equation. 8 times 7 minus 32 tells me that the measure of angle XWZ is equal to 8 times 7 minus 32, 24 degrees. So complete the rest of them for practice, and then you can work on the next part of the practice assignment.